The first lie they teach you is that your mother will always protect you. The second is that monsters don't live in nice houses with manicured lawns in Cincinnati. I learned the truth about both on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon when I was 11 years old. I learned it when my uncle, my mother's charming, handsome, celebrated brother, Tyler, took from me the one thing a little girl believes is truly her own, her safety. And when I ran to my mother, Nancy, my face streaked with tears I couldn't explain, and a violation that had no name. She didn't hold me. She didn't call the police. She didn't even look at me with an ounce of compassion. She just pointed a long, perfectly manicured finger toward the kitchen sink, which was piled high with greasy plates from lunch, and said the words that would become the foundation of my life. "Stop making things up, Margaret, and do the dishes." In that moment, the world as I knew it fractured. I was not her daughter anymore. I was a liar. My pain was not real. It was an inconvenience. My uncle was not a monster. He was her beloved brother, and I was the one trying to spoil the beautiful picture of our perfect family. They thought they had silenced me forever that day. They thought they had buried my truth under a mountain of chores and shame. They didn't know that buried things can still grow. They didn't know that the quiet, broken girl washing dishes with trembling hands was planting the seeds of a reckoning that would take 4 long decades to bloom. And when it finally did, it would tear their carefully constructed world down to the studs, leaving them with nothing but the ugly, bitter reality they had spent a lifetime refusing to see. It all started in a house that was a masterpiece of suburban deception. From the street, it was a picture of middle-class prosperity, with its neatly trimmed hedges and a welcoming front porch, where my mother grew prize-winning roses. Inside, it was a kingdom ruled by the volatile moods of my father, a distant, often absent man, and the brittle, iron-willed anxieties of my mother. Nancy's love was a currency, dispensed as a reward for compliance, and withdrawn as a punishment for any deviation from the perfect family script she had written for our lives. Her highest compliment was, "Margaret is such a good, quiet girl." My uncle Tyler was the sun around which my mother's world revolved. He was her younger brother, the golden boy who could do no wrong. He was handsome, charismatic, and a frequent visitor to our home, his presence filling the rooms with a loud, confident energy that always made my stomach clench. My mother adored him with a fierce, blind loyalty that left no room for anything or anyone else. He was her hero, her confidant, her proof that their family was special. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, bookish moon, existing only to reflect the light of others. I was the one who was told to be quiet so my father could read the paper, the one who had to give up the last piece of meatloaf because Tyler was visiting, the one who was expected to be the silent, appreciative audience for the grand performance of their lives. I didn't mind. I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be safe. I see now that the groundwork for my mother's betrayal was laid long before that terrible Tuesday. She had already chosen her side. She had already decided who was worth protecting, and who was, ultimately, expendable. The Tuesday it happened was unremarkable, which is perhaps the most monstrous thing about it. It was a day like any other in the thick, soupy heat of a Cincinnati summer. My father was away on one of his business trips. My mother was in the living room, on the phone with one of her church friends. Her voice, a bright, brittle melody of gossip and feigned piety. My uncle Tyler had dropped by, as he often did. I was in my room, reading a book, lost in a world where children were brave, and monsters were easily identifiable. Tyler came into my room, without knocking. He did that a lot. The concept of my privacy was an inconvenience he couldn't be bothered to observe. "Hey Maggie Moo," he said, using a nickname I had always hated. "What you reading?" He sat on the edge of my bed, too close. The smell of his cologne was suddenly overwhelming, cloying. I shifted away, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "A book for school," I mumbled, my eyes on the page, desperate to retreat back into its safety. "Boring," he said, and his hand was on my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Let's play a game, a secret game. Just for us. I can't write down the specifics of what he did next. The memory is not a clean narrative. It's a chaotic collage of sensory details that still have the power to stop my breath. The feeling of his weight pressing me down into my floral bedspread. The scratchy fabric of his polo shirt against my cheek. The sound of my mother's laughter from the living room. A surreal and terrible counterpoint to the silent violation happening just one room away. The way the light from the window caught the dust motes dancing in the air. A moment of strange, detached beauty in the midst of absolute horror. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I froze. I went somewhere else in my head. A small, dark, quiet place where nothing could touch me. It was a skill I had been unknowingly practicing for years. The art of becoming invisible, of disappearing in plain sight. When it was over, he stood up and straightened his shirt, his movements casual, as if he had just finished a chore. He looked down at me, the girl lying broken on the bed, and his face was a blank mask. "That's our little secret, okay, Maggie?" he said, his voice a flat, unemotional command. "Don't tell your mom. You'll just upset her." Then he walked out, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my childhood. I lay there for a long time, the world tilted on its axis, the familiar landscape of my bedroom, the posters on the wall, the stuffed animals on my shelf, the scent of my own innocence, had become a foreign and hostile territory. I was a stranger in my own body, a tourist in my own life. The pain was not just physical. It was a deep, psychic wound, a severing. He had not just taken something from me. He had stolen the very idea of safety, the fundamental belief that I was protected, that I was loved. He had taken me and he had left a ghost in my place. I don't remember how long I lay on that bed, adrift in a sea of shock, and a pain so profound it had no sound. Eventually, the haze began to clear, replaced by a desperate childish need for my mother. I needed her to fix this. I needed her to make the world right again. I needed her to look at my shattered pieces and tell me she could put me back together. I stumbled out of my room, my legs unsteady, my body feeling like a fragile, ill-fitting costume. I found her in the kitchen, her back to me, rinsing lettuce for a salad, her movements brisk and efficient. The familiar, rhythmic sound of the water running was the only sound in the room. "Mom," I whispered, my voice a dry, cracking thing. She turned, her expression one of mild annoyance at being interrupted. "Margaret, what is it? Your uncle is about to leave. Come and say goodbye properly." I couldn't form the words. The story was a monstrous, tangled thing in my throat, too big and too ugly to push out. So I just stood there, tears streaming down my face, my small body trembling with the aftershocks of the trauma. She looked at me, at my tear-stained face, at my disheveled state, and her expression did not soften, it hardened. A look of pure, unadulterated exasperation crossed her face. "For heaven's sake, Margaret, what is it now?" she snapped. "Are you crying because you have to do one simple chore?" "Uncle Tyler," I managed to choke out. His name, a shard of glass in my mouth. He hurt me." I looked at her, my eyes pleading, begging her to see, to understand, to believe me. I was her daughter. I was 11 years old. I was bleeding from a wound. She couldn't see, but surely she could feel it. Her eyes narrowed. She put the lettuce down with a sharp, definitive thud. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked towards me. For a fleeting, hopeful second, I thought she was going to hug me. I thought she was going to hold me and tell me everything would be okay. She did not. She stopped a foot in front of me, her body rigid, her face a mask of cold fury. "What did you say?" she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "What lie are you telling now?" "It's not a lie." In my room. He what, Margaret?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Did he tease you? Did he take one of your silly dolls? Whatever it is, I am sure you provoked him. You are always so dramatic, so needy." "No," I whispered, shaking my head, the denial a fresh wave of pain. But I couldn't say it. The shame was a physical gag in my mouth, and in my hesitation, she saw confirmation, of what she had already decided to believe. She saw a difficult, lying little girl, trying to cause trouble for her perfect, beloved brother. Her face, which could be so beautiful when she smiled, twisted into a mask of ugly contempt. "I have had enough of your stories, Margaret," she said, her voice like ice. "My brother is a good man. He would never do anything to hurt you unless you deserved it. Now stop this ridiculous nonsense this instant." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin like claws. She spun me around and pointed a long, accusatory finger towards the sink. "Stop making it up and do the dishes," she commanded, her voice a final, brutal verdict. "And I don't want to hear another word about this. Do you understand me?" I stood there, frozen, the world tilting and swaying around me. The smell of fresh dill from the salad dressing filled the air, a smell I would associate with betrayal for the rest of my life. She had not just refused to believe me, she had actively chosen not to. She had chosen him, her perfect illusion, over her own daughter's reality. She had looked at my pain and called it a lie. She had looked at my trauma and called it a chore. In that moment, I understood. I was utterly and completely alone. There was no one to save me. There was no safe harbor. My mother was not my protector. She was his. I was a casualty in a war I didn't even know was being fought, and my own mother had just handed the enemy the weapon to finish me off. I turned, a small silent soldier of 11, and I walked to the sink. And as I washed the dishes, my tears falling silently into the soapy water, I realized that my uncle had broken my body, but my mother had just shattered my soul. The years that followed, that terrible Tuesday, were a long, slow exercise in suffocation. The official family narrative had been established. I was a liar, a troublemaker, a difficult and dramatic child. My uncle, Tyler, was the innocent, the victim of my malicious fantasy, and my mother, Nancy, was the long-suffering saint, burdened with a daughter she couldn't control. This narrative became the air we breathed in that house, a toxic, invisible gas that poisoned everything. Tyler, emboldened by my mother's unwavering protection, became a king in our home. My fear of him was a constant, low-grade hum beneath the surface of my life. He never touched me again in that way, but he didn't have to. He had other, more subtle ways of reminding me of his power. He would accidentally brush against me in the hallway, a casual touch that would send a jolt of ice through my veins. He would corner me in a room and just stand there, smiling a small secret smile that only the two of us understood. He would use my things without asking, read my diary, break my possessions, and then tell my mother I had been careless. And she, of course, always believed him. "Margaret, you need to take better care of your things," she would scold, her voice full of disappointment. He was untouchable, a golden boy wrapped in the impenetrable armor of our mother's denial. She doted on him, praised his every minor achievement, and boasted about his charm to her friends. His every success was a testament to her excellent family. My existence, on the other hand, was a constant source of her irritation. My quietness was interpreted as sullenness. My sadness was seen as a manipulative bid for attention. My good grades, my one area of silent rebellion and escape, were barely acknowledged. I learned to live in the margins of our family, to make myself as small and as quiet as possible. I became a ghost in my own home, haunting the hallways, my only goal to move from one room to another, without being noticed. The house itself became a landscape of terror. My own bedroom, the scene of the crime, was a place I could no longer find comfort in. I would lie in bed at night, my body rigid, listening for the sound of his car in the driveway, his footsteps in the hall. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall, was a potential threat. Sleep was not a refuge. It was a state of vulnerability I feared. The injustice of it all was a constant, bitter pill I was forced to swallow. Every day, "I raised you better," the phrase my mother would use on me for the smallest transgression, a spilled glass of milk, a forgotten chore, was a cruel joke. She had not raised me at all. She had raised an illusion, and she had sacrificed me to maintain it. She had taught me that my pain was insignificant, my voice was a nuisance, and my truth was a lie. These were the lessons of my childhood. I built a fortress around my heart, a wall of silence and compliance. I learned that showing emotion was a weakness, that asking for help was a provocation. I became an expert at reading the subtle shifts in the emotional weather of our home, at anticipating my mother's moods, at avoiding my uncle's gaze. It was an exhausting, soul-crushing performance, but it was the only way I knew how to survive. I was a child living in a war zone, and the only strategy I had was to play dead. The world outside the front door of our Cincinnati home felt like a distant, foreign country, a place where other children had mothers who protected them, homes that were safe. I would watch them from my window, playing in their yards, riding their bikes, and a deep, aching loneliness would settle over me. I was on an island of my family's making, and there was no boat in sight. As I navigated the treacherous landscape of adolescence, the toxic dynamic in our home solidified into a rigid, unchangeable caste system. Uncle Tyler was the visiting prince, his presence a cause for celebration, his every word treated as gospel. I was the scullery maid, my existence tolerated only as long as I remained silent and served my purpose. And my mother, Nancy, was the queen regent, the power behind the throne, enforcing the brutal laws of her brother's kingdom. The abuse from Tyler shifted from the physical to the psychological, a more subtle but no less damaging form of torture. He was a master of 1,000 small cruelties. He would accidentally spill a drink on my homework. He would borrow my things and then lose them. He would tell his friends embarrassing, untrue stories about me, his voice just loud enough for me to overhear from the next room. Each act was a small reminder of his power, a way of reinforcing the narrative that I was clumsy, forgetful, and pathetic. He delighted in my misery, and my mother was his most enthusiastic audience. She saw his cruelty as normal family teasing, my reactions as further proof of my oversensitivity. "Oh, Margaret, you need to learn to take a joke," she would say with a sigh, as if his systematic torment was a form of light-hearted fun. "You're always so serious." My teenage years, a time that for most girls is filled with friendships, first crushes, and a burgeoning sense of self, were for me a period of profound and painful isolation. I was not allowed to have friends over. "Tyler might be stopping by," my mother would say, as if his potential presence required the entire house to be on lockdown. I was not allowed to go to school dances or football games. "It's not safe for a girl like you to be out at night," she would warn, the implication clear. A girl like me, a liar, a troublemaker, could not be trusted. My life was a monotonous cycle of school, chores, and homework, all performed under the constant, watchful eye of my mother and the menacing shadow of my uncle. School became my only escape, the one place where I could be something other than the family scapegoat. I poured all of my energy into my studies, finding a strange, clean comfort in the logic of science and the certainty of mathematics. I was a ghost in the hallways, a quiet, serious girl who ate lunch alone in the library, but my grades were flawless. My teachers saw a diligent, if socially awkward student. They praised my work ethic and my intelligence, and for a few hours each day, their validation was a small, precious shield against the poison at home. My academic success, however, was a source of irritation for my family. It disrupted their narrative. It was difficult to paint me as a complete failure when I was at the top of my class. My uncle, who had been a mediocre student, resented it deeply. "She's just a bookworm," he'd sneer. "She has no life." My mother, instead of being proud, was suspicious. "I hope you're not cheating, Margaret," she'd say. Her eyes narrowed. "It doesn't seem possible for you to be that smart." They could not allow me to have anything that was truly mine, anything that they could not control or diminish. The injustice of it was a constant, slow-burning fire in my gut. I had done nothing wrong, and yet I was being punished every single day. I had been the victim of a crime, and I was being treated like the criminal. I learned to build walls around my heart, so high and so thick that nothing could get in. I did not cry. I did not complain. I did not show any emotion at all. I became a master of the blank face, the placid expression, the quiet compliance. It was a mask I wore to survive, but I was terrified that one day, the mask would become my face, that the ghost I was pretending to be would be all that was left of me. The day I left for college was the first day of my life. I had earned a full academic scholarship to a small university in Chicago, a city blessedly, gloriously, far from Cincinnati. The scholarship was my ticket out, my declaration of independence, and my family treated it with a mixture of suspicion and relief. My uncle Tyler was furious. My success was a direct affront to his own sense of superiority. He couldn't understand how the quiet, broken girl he had tormented for years had managed to achieve something he never could. He accused me of cheating on my entrance exams, a lie my mother was all too willing to entertain. My mother, Nancy's reaction was more complex. On the one hand, she was relieved to be rid of me, the constant, silent accusation that my presence represented. On the other hand, my departure disrupted the delicate balance of her toxic family. Who would do the dishes now? Who would be the target for her free-floating rage and disappointment? On the day I left, my father, who had been a phantom presence throughout my entire ordeal, drove me to the airport. We sat in a strained, uncomfortable silence for most of the ride. As I was getting out of the car, he turned to me, his eyes filled with a sad, weak pity. "You be good, Margaret," was all he said. He had been a ghost in his own home, a man so terrified of his wife's temper and her brother's monstrousness that he had chosen to see nothing, to say nothing. His silence was not as loud as my mother's, but it was a betrayal nonetheless. College was a revelation. It was a world of noise, of laughter, of ideas, of people who saw me, not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be known. For the first time in my life, I breathed air that was not thick with unspoken secrets and simmering resentment. I was terrified. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to have a normal conversation. The social skills that other people had learned naturally were a foreign language to me. I spent the first few months eating my meals alone, in my dorm room, hiding in the library, a ghost in a new and overwhelming world. But slowly, tentatively, I began to emerge. I made one friend, a girl in my economics class, named Monica. She was loud and funny and completely unimpressed by my quietness. She saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. She saw strength. "You're like one of those deep-sea creatures," she told me once, "all quiet and still on the surface, but underneath, you're surviving under immense pressure." She was the first person I ever told, not everything, not at first, just fragments, that my home life was difficult, that my uncle and I didn't get along, that my mother was complicated. Monica listened without judgment, and her friendship became my lifeline. I excelled in my study. The university was a meritocracy, a place where my intelligence and hard work were rewarded. I majored in finance, drawn to the clean, cold logic of numbers. Numbers didn't lie. Spreadsheets didn't have mood. There was a safety in the certainty of a balanced ledger that I had never known in my own home. My relationship with my family during those years was a strained, hollow thing. I would call home once a week, a duty I performed with a heavy heart. The conversations were always the same. My mother would complain about her life, about the weather, about the price of groceries. She would then give me a detailed, glowing report of my uncle's latest achievements, a promotion at his job, a new car he had bought, a girlfriend she approved of. There was never a question about my life, my studies, my friends. My existence was an afterthought. When I graduated with honors, they did not come to the ceremony. "It's too far to travel," my mother had said on the phone, her voice, "and your Uncle Tyler is having a very important golf tournament that weekend." I stood on the graduation stage, my diploma in my hand, and I searched the crowd for a familiar face, even though I knew there would be none. And in that moment, I realized that I was truly, finally, on my. The last tie had been cut. I was an orphan, not by death, but by choice. There's tea. The 30 days, leading up to the closing, were a tense, surreal waiting game. I communicated with my family, only through brief, non-committal text messages, pleading the demands of my project in Chicago. They were furious, their messages, a barrage of guilt trips, and angry demands. Margaret, the physical therapist, says you need to come home and help with her recovery. Margaret, this is selfish. Your mother needs you. I ignored them. Their needs were no longer my problem. My only focus was the quiet ticking clock of our legal timeline. On the day of the closing, I flew back to Cincinnati. I sat in Miss Albright's office, my heart a steady, calm drum against my ribs. I signed the documents with a hand that did not shake. The house, the physical and emotional center of my life's pain, was sold. My half of the proceeds was wired directly into my new, secure bank account. My mother's half was placed in a trust, managed by an impartial third party, to be used for her future medical care. A final ironic act of the caregiving they had so callously demanded of me. Now all that was left was the final devastating act of our quiet, legal We had arranged for a sheriff's deputy to serve the official notice to vacate. We timed it for a Tuesday afternoon, the day my mother had her weekly bridge game at a neighbor's house. We wanted my Uncle Tyler to be the one to receive the news. Alone, I sat in my rental car, parked at the end of the street, my heart pounding. I watched as the deputy's car pulled into the driveway. I watched as he walked to the front door and knocked. I saw the door open and Tyler's silhouette appear. I saw the deputy hand him the thick legal envelope. I saw Tyler's posture change from arrogant confidence to stunned disbelief. I saw him stumble back into the house and slam the door. It was done. The ripple effect was immediate and spectacular. Tyler called me, his voice a raw, ragged shriek of pure panic. "Margaret, what did you do?" "A cop was just here. He gave me some kind of eviction notice. He said the house is sold." "This is a joke, right?" I let the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke, my voice as calm and cool as the surface of a deep lake. "It's not a joke, Tyler. It's a real estate transaction. The estate has been settled. The house is sold. You and my mother have 30 days to vacate the property." "You can't do this," he yelled, his voice cracking. "This is our family home. Nancy lives here." "No, dear," I said, my voice quiet, but laced with steel. "She lived there, and you visited, and you both treated me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. The new owners will be taking possession next month. I suggest you start packing." You planned this," he whispered, the dawning horror in his voice, the sweetest music I had ever heard. "You told me to stop making things up," I said softly, throwing my mother's own cruel words back at him. "So I stopped, and I started making things happen. Goodbye, Tyler." I hung up the phone. The boy I had feared, the man who had tormented me, the uncle who had stood by while I was dismissed and devalued, he was finally truly on his own. The matriarch and her prince had just been deposed, and their kingdom sold to the highest bidder. I sit on the balcony of my Chicago apartment now, a cup of coffee warming my hands, and I watch the sun rise over the city. The air is cool and clean, and the quiet is a comforting blanket, not a suffocating shroud. My life is my own, curated not by my mother's expectations, or my uncle's cruelty, but by my own sense of peace. The aftermath of the sale was as messy and as satisfying as I had imagined. My mother, upon returning from her bridge game to find her world upended, had a full-blown hysterical fit. My Uncle Tyler, stripped of the financial and domestic support system he had taken for granted his entire life, was completely lost. They were forced to move into a small, run-down apartment, their comfortable lives and sense of entitlement shattered. Their relationship, a toxic codependency built on a foundation of my silent suffering, began to crumble under the weight of their new, harsh reality. They turned on each other, their arguments legendary in their new, thin-walled apartment complex. My uncle, without the status and comfort my mother's home had provided, lost his charm. My mother, without the perfect house to curate and a daughter to blame, was just a bitter old woman. They had lost everything they valued: their home, their social standing, and their power over me. I have not spoken to either of them since that final explosive phone call. A few months ago, I received a letter, forwarded from Miss Albright. The handwriting was my mother's, a shaky, spidery scrawl. It was a long, rambling letter, filled not with apology but with a litany of her own hardship. Her life was so difficult, she was so lonely. My uncle was a disappointment. It ended with a single stunning sentence: After everything, I think you owe it to me to come home and take care of me. I read the letter, and then I did something the old Margaret would never have done. I laughed, a real deep, genuine laugh. The sheer unmitigated gall of it was almost impressive. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder Miss Albright had given me as a closing gift, and I fed it into the machine. I watched as her words, her entitlement, her complete lack of self-awareness, were turned into a meaningless confetti of paper. My help, my love, my service, they were no longer hers to command. I had found new places to invest my hope. I used a significant portion of my inheritance to establish a foundation in my father's name, not because he was a hero, but because his weakness had inadvertently given me the tool to save myself. The Frank Davis Foundation provides grants and legal aid to children and adult survivors of familial abuse, helping them navigate the complex and often brutal legal system. My family's darkest secret has become my life's most meaningful work. My story is not one of revenge. Not really. It is a story of reclamation. It is the story of a woman who was told she was a liar and remembered that the truth was her greatest weapon. It is a story about the quiet, unshakable power that comes from knowing your own worth, even when those closest to you have spent a lifetime trying to convince you that you have none. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And as I watch the morning light spill across my apartment, I am filled with a profound and lasting peace. They told me to stop lying and do the dishes. I did, and then I made sure they were the ones who had to clean up the mess for the rest of their life.